On March 21, 2017, 6-year-old Jack and his younger sister Alice were rushed by their uncle to Nanjing County, Xiangyang City, Hubei Province, China, to live in their grandparents' humble rural home. Just a day earlier, they had been living in a luxurious apartment in Shanghai. All of these sudden changes stemmed from their mother, Fu Weiwei. Weiwei could be considered a modern-day Cinderella. Born in 1987 to a humble farming family in Hubei, she had one older brother. Her parents made a living repairing bicycles. Due to the family's financial struggles, she had to drop out of school before finishing middle school to find work. With limited education and no specialized skills, she could only take on low-paying, physically demanding jobs to survive. After years of struggling, Weiwei moved to Shanghai, taking on various jobs: factory worker, janitor, sales associate, and even a street vendor. These jobs were physically exhausting and did not pay well. In 2009, at the age of 22, Weiwei was hired as a sales associate at the Next children's fashion store. From that moment, her life began to change. Next is a well-known British multinational fashion brand with a long history dating back to 1864. Weiwei was thrilled to work for such a prestigious company, and she worked harder and more passionately than ever before. That same year, Next's UK headquarters assigned a young manager to take over as a senior director at the Shanghai branch. His name was Michael Simpson, born in 1982 in a middle-class family in Dorset, England. His father was a senior executive at a major corporation, while his mother was a homemaker with a passion for art. Michael received an excellent education and had outstanding academic achievements. He graduated from a prestigious university in the UK and soon began working at Next, where his exceptional skills quickly propelled him to a senior management position. By the time he was not even 30, he was already earning a lucrative salary. With his handsome appearance, high education, and successful career, Michael was seen as the ideal bachelor among Chinese women: well-educated, high income, and attractive. One came from a privileged family, while the other was an ordinary woman with no remarkable background. Under normal circumstances, their lives should never have intersected. But by chance, Michael met Fu Weiwei. At Next's Shanghai branch, Michael was primarily responsible for website operations and store management. During a routine store inspection, he came across Weiwei while she was working. While she wasn't conventionally beautiful, her style, confidence, and sense of fashion stood out. Moreover, she had a sincerity and authenticity that city women often lacked. These qualities deeply attracted Michael. To Weiwei, a man like Michael was like a prince on a white horse, something she never even dared to dream of. As they spent more time together, they quickly fell in love. Before long, Weiwei became pregnant, and with joy and anticipation, they decided to get married. Weiwei's family had initial concerns about the relationship. The wedding was rushed, and Michael did not follow traditional Chinese customs, such as preparing a betrothal gift or securing a marital home. However, given their limited financial situation, Weiwei's family believed that marrying early and securing stability wasn't a bad choice. Michael's father, Ian, even flew from England to Shanghai to witness this cross-cultural wedding. In 2011, their first child, Jack, was born. After becoming a mother, Fu Weiwei gave up her job as a sales associate to become a full-time homemaker, dedicating herself to taking care of the family. 2 years later, she gave birth to their daughter, Alice. These two little ones brought immense joy and warmth to their family. At this point, Weiwei was living a life many envied. Michael not only loved her and their children, but also provided them with a comfortable and privileged lifestyle. The two children attended a top-tier bilingual international school, receiving a high-quality education. Their life seemed perfect: a son and a daughter, financial security, a harmonious family, a picture-perfect existence. However, beneath this seemingly perfect life, cracks had already begun to form, hidden from the outside world. On March 20th, 2017, Weiwei discovered that Michael had been unfaithful, Unable to contain her rage, she arranged a confrontation, bringing along two friends, one of whom was tasked with taking photos and recording videos to expose the scandal. Fearing that the situation might spiral out of control, she hastily stuffed a knife into her pocket, just in case. When the three women stormed into the house, they saw a woman walking out of the kitchen. Blinded by fury, Wei Wei lunged at her, ready to attack. Michael immediately jumped in to protect the woman, holding her tightly in his arms while yelling at Wei Wei. That moment shattered Wei Wei's heart completely. Her emotions collapsed, and the fruit knife in her hand, no longer under her control, slashed toward the man she had once loved the most. Moments later, Michael lay in a pool of blood, and the woman in the house was also severely injured. Wei Wei, now in shock, collapsed onto the floor with a dazed expression. The police received an emergency call and arrived at the scene quickly, taking everyone involved into custody for questioning. The most heartbreaking part? At that very moment, their two young children were sound asleep in their rooms, completely unaware of the tragedy unfolding in their home. A life that once seemed flawless and fulfilled had crumbled in a single night. At this point, many people might begin criticizing Michael. How could he bring his mistress home and even protect her right in front of his wife? It's easy to understand why Wei Wei was so enraged. But was that really the truth? As we mentioned earlier, Wei Wei and Michael's relationship developed quickly. They had rushed into marriage before truly understanding each other's personalities. Over time, as they lived together, their differences and conflicts gradually surfaced. To provide a better life for his wife and children, Michael became a workaholic. He buried himself in work every day, rarely taking breaks. Despite his demanding schedule, he still tried to balance family and career. Every night, he made sure to come home on time, tell the children bedtime stories, hold their hands, and stay with them until they fell asleep. Whenever he had free time, he took his children on trips to broaden their horizons. Beyond his role as a father, Michael also dedicated time to Wei Wei. He actively maintained their private world as a couple, often sharing their sweet moments on social media, portraying an ideal family life. For Michael, marriage and family had always been the center of his life. He constantly tried his best to fulfill his role as a husband and father. However, after marriage, Wei Wei changed significantly, especially after having two children. She was no longer the hardworking and humble girl she once was. Perhaps to compensate for the hardships of her past, she became obsessed with luxury and material enjoyment. After giving birth to their second child, Wei Wei began excessive luxury shopping, spent nights partying at bars, and even left the responsibility of caring for the children to her workaholic husband. For Michael, the expensive tuition fees for their children at an elite international school, combined with Wei Wei's extravagant spending, placed a heavy financial burden on the family. Despite repeatedly advising her to cut back on spending, Wei Wei ignored him. In fact, she became even more indulgent, leading to frequent arguments between them. During one heated argument, Fu Wei Wei threw a bowl at Michael, hitting his forehead and leaving a deep scar. When the family visited England, Michael's father, Ian, also noticed his daughter-in-law's selfish behavior. Wei Wei would sit on the couch playing on her phone, rarely engaging with the family, and pushing all childcare responsibilities onto Michael. Later, when Ian saw the injury on his son's forehead and learned that Wei Wei had caused it, he urged Michael to reconsider his marriage. Due to their huge differences in lifestyle and personality, Michael officially proposed divorce in 2015. However, Wei Wei refused. After all, she had worked her way up from an ordinary sales associate to the wife of a senior executive, admired by those around her. Moreover, since getting married, she had become completely disconnected from society, financially dependent on Michael's support. For Wei Wei, divorce meant losing her financial security and stability. With no other options, Michael proposed a legal separation and drafted a formal agreement stating that he would have full custody of the children, while Wei Wei would have visitation rights and receive monthly financial support. Realizing that both sides needed time to cool down and reflect, Wei Wei eventually agreed to the arrangement. After their separation, Michael's emotional state improved significantly. From 2016 until his death, he frequently posted photos on social media, most of them showing him with his children at Disneyland or during trips back to England. In reality, the separation agreement was a strategic move for Michael. According to Chinese marriage law, if a couple lives separately for more than 2 years due to emotional breakdown, it can be a legal basis for divorce. However, Wei Wei clearly had a completely different understanding of their separation compared to Michael. She saw this period as merely a temporary cooling-off phase and believed there was still a chance for them to reconcile. But she failed to realize that Michael had already lost faith in their marriage. Instead of reflecting on their marital crisis, Wei Wei continued her extravagant lifestyle, making no effort to change. Because of their completely different expectations, when a third person entered the picture, the conflict finally erupted beyond control. By 2017, after being separated for 2 years, Michael could have filed for divorce through legal procedures. However, at the worst possible time, another woman entered his life. The woman's name was Lin Jing, and she was completely different from Wei Wei. She was a senior executive who had recently returned from studying abroad in the UK, had a high level of education, and earned a substantial income. In every way, she seemed a perfect match for Michael. The two met through work and quickly hit it off. Michael expressed his desire to take their relationship further, but Lin Jing refused, knowing that he was still legally married. Michael explained that his marriage had already fallen apart, that he had been separated for nearly 2 years, and that he was on the verge of getting a divorce. Lin Jing was not only intelligent and successful, but she also adored Michael's 2 children and often played with them. Since Jack and Alice were still young, they enjoyed spending time with Lin Jing and didn't fully grasp that their parents were about to divorce. To Michael, Lin Jing was the ideal partner, someone who could share his burdens, support him emotionally, and help create a stable, loving home. He planned to finalize his divorce from Wei Wei and then start a new life with Lin Jing. However, before his vision for the future could become reality, it was completely destroyed by a deadly storm. The aftermath of that storm sparked a heated custody battle that attracted widespread attention in both China and the UK. The day after the tragedy, Wei Wei's older brother quickly took Jack and Alice to their grandparents' home in Nanjing County, Hubei Province. The children were enrolled in a rural elementary school, but the drastic change in their environment made it incredibly difficult for them to adjust. They had grown up in an elite international education system, and now they were thrown into a completely different learning environment. For a time, Jack and Alice refused to go to school altogether. Additionally, Fu Weiwei's family lived in an old, rural home with very limited resources. Since there weren't enough rooms, Jack and Alice had to share a bedroom with their cousin, making their living conditions cramped and uncomfortable. During this time, Michael's father, Ian, made multiple attempts to contact Wei Wei's brother to discuss the custody arrangements, but his calls were ignored. According to reports, Ian even compiled a photo album filled with pictures of Michael throughout his life, hoping to help the children remember their father and cope with their grief. However, Wei Wei's brother blocked the delivery and never gave the album to Jack and Alice. For months, Wei Wei's family remained completely silent, ignoring Ian's pleas to see his grandchildren. However, just before Wei Wei's trial, they suddenly reached out, but not to discuss custody. Instead, they demanded that Ian write a letter of leniency to help reduce Wei Wei's sentence. Furious, Ian refused outright, but Wei Wei's family didn't give up. To force Ian's cooperation, they used Jack and Alice as bargaining chips. They promised to let him see his grandchildren, but only if he agreed to write the leniency letter. Their demands didn't stop there. Not only did they want Ian's letter of sympathy, but they also had the audacity to demand that he pay for the children's living expenses for the past year. At this point, Ian was beyond enraged. The absurdity of their demands was too much to bear. He furiously lashed out, shouting, "Have you forgotten who killed my son?" What made the situation even more infuriating was that it was later revealed that Wei Wei's family had deliberately fed false information to the children, telling them that their father had returned to England and no longer wanted them. This was beyond cruel. Not only had they taken his life, but they were also trying to destroy the children's memories of him. Faced with this situation, Michael's parents, thousands of miles away, were exhausted. They realized that if they refused to compromise, they wouldn't just lose the opportunity to see their grandchildren, but also risk having the children's memory of their father completely distorted. With a heavy heart, Ian made the painful decision to write a letter of leniency, which helped reduce Weiwei's sentence by 25 years. Additionally, he agreed to pay £10,000 for the children's living expenses, on the condition that he would be allowed to bring them back to England afterward. However, during negotiations, Weiwei's family rejected the offer. It wasn't because they didn't want to part with the children, rather, they felt the money was too little. They quickly set their own terms. 1. Ian must bring the children back to China once a year for visits. 2. He must pay £62,000 to buy out full custody rights. Ian was shocked. It felt like a commercial transaction rather than a custody discussion. It was clear that Weiwei's family was exploiting his love for his grandchildren to extort money. After carefully weighing the situation, Ian refused to pay the amount and also withdrew his offer to write the leniency letter. On July 9, 2018, the Shanghai Intermediate People's Court issued its verdict. Fu Weiwei was convicted of intentional homicide and sentenced to life imprisonment, with no possibility of sentence reduction or parole before 2035. She was ordered to pay over 150,000 RMB to Michael's family. She was also required to pay 290,000 RMB in damages to Lin Jing, who had been severely injured in the attack. With this, the murder trial came to an end, but the custody battle was far from over. Determined to win custody, Ian frequently traveled between England and China and filed a lawsuit with the Shanghai Intermediate People's Court in hopes of securing guardianship of his grandchildren. He couldn't understand why, as the family of the murder victim, he had so little say in the case. During this period, he spent at least £100,000 on legal fees, flights, and lawyer expenses. Yet over the next year, Weiwei's family refused to back down. They continued to block Ian from visiting his grandchildren, making it clear that they would only relinquish custody if they were paid in full. On July 28, 2018, newly appointed UK Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt was preparing for an official visit to China. At this moment, he received an email. It was an urgent message that Ian had persuaded his former boss to forward to Hunt, pleading for help in securing custody of his grandchildren in China. Hunt quickly responded, agreeing to assist. According to media reports, Hunt raised the issue of custody rights in discussions with senior officials from China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The Chinese side responded that they would provide assistance within legal boundaries, ensuring that judicial independence remained unaffected. In mid-December 2018, the Nanjing County People's Court, Hunan Province, held a hearing for the cross-border custody dispute. The two parties reached an out-of-court settlement. Ian's family would pay £9,000 to Weiwei's family as child support for Alice and to cover travel and long-distance phone charges for future visits between the two siblings. The Weiwei family, represented by her mother, agreed to relinquish custody of 6-year-old Alice, while 8-year-old Jack would remain with his maternal grandparents in Nanjing. After signing the agreement, Ian told the media, "This outcome is not perfect. I feel sad because I couldn't bring Jack home, but it's better than not bringing any of them back at all." Despite the deep sadness and hesitation, Ian knew that this was likely the only choice. On December 26th, the siblings said goodbye at a hotel in Nanjing County. Jack cried, begging not to let his sister leave. Despite the overwhelming pain, they had to face the reality. Ian finally took Alice on a train from Hubei to Shanghai, where they completed the paperwork for their flight back to the UK. From that point on, the siblings were separated by thousands of miles. The reason Weiwei's family kept Jack was the hope that he could eventually care for his mother when she was released from prison. This outcome was hard for many to accept, especially since after the incident, Weiwei's family not only showed no remorse, but also appeared to be calculating every step. They used the children's future as bargaining chips, carefully plotting their moves. Their actions not only embarrassed Chinese families, but also cast a shadow over cross-border marriages. From the subsequent actions of Weiwei's family, it is not hard to understand the deep-rooted reasons behind her extreme behavior. As Ian said in an interview, "I don't harbor hatred for Wei Wei. Honestly, I probably resent her family even more." After returning to England, Ian hired a Chinese-speaking person to gently tell Alice that her father had passed away and her mother was in prison. Alice innocently asked, "Why did Mom do that?" Ian replied that sometimes people make mistakes out of anger and impulsiveness, but he never intended to taint her image of her mother. At the same time, Ian learned that Wei Wei's family had told Jack the truth about Michael's death and even took him to visit Wei Wei in prison twice. Afterward, although the siblings still had regular video calls, Wei Wei's family refused to honor the previously agreed-upon arrangement, denying Jack's visit to the UK to reunite with his sister during the holidays. Ian had once hoped to force Wei Wei's family to comply with the agreement through legal procedures, but this would not only cost him £20,000, but also take at least a year. Even with legal action, there was no guarantee that Wei Wei's family would actually follow through on the agreement. Despite this, Ian did not give up on his determination to win custody of Jack. After several rounds of negotiations, Ian finally secured the opportunity to video call with Jack. He found that Jack couldn't speak any English, and when he showed him pictures of Michael on his computer, Jack broke down in tears, repeatedly calling out, "Dad." The scene broke Ian's heart. In August 2019, to help the two children reunite as soon as possible, Ian wrote a letter to Wei Wei's family, proposing to pay £40,000 in exchange for custody of his grandson Jack, hoping they could use the money to secure Wei Wei's daily life after her release from prison. However, it seemed that Wei Wei's family did not agree to this proposal. In August 2020, the British media reported that Ian was preparing to take Alice to China to visit Jack. But after that, there was a sudden silence about the two families. If Ian had truly won custody, the media would have surely reported it widely. It was clear that the cousins had not yet been able to reunite successfully. One can imagine that, as the two children grew up in completely different environments, their lives may have taken very different paths. However, we still believe that, as time passes, the siblings will eventually overcome the shadows of their past and embrace their own futures. We also hope that Jack and Michael will someday meet again. And that concludes the first story. Now, let's move on to the next case. Around 9 a.m. on March 20th, 2020, a sudden fire broke out in a residential building in Ningcheng Town, Pudong District, Shanghai. The scene was packed with onlookers, their eyes filled with fear and unease. What stood out was that 4 people were standing close to the fire, right next to the building engulfed in flames. Unlike the others who were standing at a distance, they were standing very close to the fire and moving around continuously. Among them, a man in his 50s appeared to be extremely anxious, repeatedly trying to rush into the flames, but was fortunately stopped by those around him. It turned out that his daughter was still trapped in the fire, unable to escape. His eyes were filled with despair as he struggled and called out her name. Thanks to the efforts of the firefighters, the fire was quickly brought under control. However, a heartbreaking piece of news was soon reported. The firefighters discovered a body in the burned-down house. Although the body was so badly burned that it was unrecognizable, it was confirmed to be the daughter of the man, Liu Min, 26 years old. Then, a shocking discovery completely changed the direction of the investigation. Firefighters found a fruit knife embedded in Liu Min's body. This meant that she did not die from the fire, but had been murdered beforehand. This discovery completely changed the nature of the case, revealing it was not an accident, but a murder. Clearly, the perpetrator had intended to use the fire to cover up the crime. This terrifying news caused Liu Min's parents to faint multiple times at the scene. They couldn't accept this brutal reality. A young life, a family full of love and hope, had been destroyed without mercy. Upon investigation, it was found that Liu Min lived a simple life with few social interactions. Apart from occasional gatherings with her colleague teachers on weekends, she had no other social activities. She was recognized as an outstanding teacher at her school, with a gentle personality and a strong relationship with her colleagues. Being the only daughter, Liu Min was very filial to her parents. Her neighbors also spoke highly of her, saying that she treated everyone very kindly and had never had conflicts with anyone. So, why would a well-regarded teacher with such a simple social life fall victim to this tragedy? What secrets were hidden behind her death? As the police prepared to investigate further and public opinion was stirring, the perpetrator of the crime voluntarily turned himself in at the police station. What shocked everyone even more was that the perpetrator was Liu Min's newlywed husband, Yan. This news immediately shocked the public. It was known that Liu Min and Yan Haoji had been married for only 3 months, still in the honeymoon phase of their marriage. This couple should have been enjoying a happy life together, so why did Liu Min have to die at the hands of her husband? As the investigation progressed, the horrifying truth behind this seemingly happy marriage began to emerge. From a young age, Liu Min had been well-behaved and well cared for by her parents. Her growing-up years had rarely caused her parents any worry. After high school, she was accepted into Shanghai University of Foreign Languages with excellent results. Her friends and family spoke highly of her, describing her as well-behaved and thoughtful from an early age. When Liu Min's mother spoke of her daughter, her eyes were filled with pride. She recounted, "During her high school years, I was always there with her. During the day, she went to school while I worked, and in the evening, after her classes, I would study with her. She was always very thoughtful and never gave us any cause for concern." After entering university, Liu Min gradually learned to live independently. She not only dedicated herself to her studies, but also made thorough plans for her future. Through her continuous effort, she successfully obtained her teaching certification, and after graduating, she stayed at the school to work as a literature teacher. As a teacher, Liu Min was kind to everyone, with a dynamic and engaging teaching style, which made her popular among students. Parents of her students also praised her endlessly. With a solid teaching foundation and a dedicated attitude toward her work, Liu Min quickly gained the respect of her superiors. In just 4 years, she was promoted to team leader for her department, with a bright future ahead. As for Yan, Liu Min's newlywed husband, he was born into a wealthy family in Shanghai. His family owned a manufacturing business, and he fit the typical image of a rich young man. However, Yan was not the biological child of his parents. He was adopted, and he hadn't known this fact until later in life. The reason for this was that Yan's parents had lost a child to leukemia when the child was 11 years old. Afterward, they had one more pregnancy, but it ended in a miscarriage. After these painful events, they decided to adopt Yan from Anhui province. Perhaps because they had experienced the pain of losing a child, Yan's parents showered him with love. In an effort to provide him with a better education, they enrolled him in a top private school when he was in elementary school. However, the strict environment there was hard for him to adapt to, and he would often cry every night in the dormitory. Upon learning this, his parents transferred him to a school closer to home to ensure he could return home daily. Although he grew up with all these privileges, Yan developed a dependent mindset, and his academic performance was always poor. After graduating from high school, he didn't pass the university entrance exams and only briefly attended a college before deciding to drop out. Seeing this, his parents believed that the educational environment was to blame, so they spared no expense and sent him to study abroad in the UK, hoping he would develop better in a foreign country. However, reality didn't match their expectations. Yan continued to be aimless abroad, refusing to study seriously and frequently skipping classes. Eventually, due to not earning enough credits, he couldn't graduate and had to return to China early. Afterward, Yan Haoji, lacking a degree and experience, found it extremely difficult to find work. Even at this point, his parents continued to shield him, helping him secure a job in auto repair. However, despite all their care and love, Yan became more selfish, weak, irresponsible, and began to avoid reality. In January 2019, Yan met Liu Min through friends. The two quickly fell in love. Liu Min's parents were quite pleased with this man, believing that he not only had a stable job, behaved appropriately, but had also studied abroad. At that time, they didn't know that this seemingly impressive son-in-law was, in reality, a wolf in sheep's clothing. On August 17, 2019, after 7 months of dating, Yan and Liu Min registered their marriage and held their wedding on January 1st of the following year. Despite Yan's many flaws, his good family background and stable job made him appear, to outsiders, to have a relatively good situation. So why would someone with such a promising future push his newlywed wife to her death? What was his motive? Let's go back to the day the crime occurred. On March 20th, 2020, Liu Min was at home, preparing to teach an online class for her students. Due to the pandemic, she spent most of her time at her parents' house for convenience. Around 9 a.m., Liu Min's parents left for work, and she was home alone. Shortly after, Yan drove a white BMW into the residential area. When they were newlyweds, the young couple would often bring fruits and snacks to visit her parents. At that time, they laughed and joked happily, with no sign of trouble. But things had changed, and now he arrived with a darker intention. After entering the house, Yan asked his wife to lend him money. Since they had received around 700,000 yen as wedding gifts, he wanted to borrow 250,000 yen urgently. You might wonder, with Yan's family being financially well off, his father owning a factory and having more than enough money, why would Yan suddenly ask his wife for money? It turned out that Yan Haoji was an irredeemable gambler. He confessed to his wife that he owed money to loan sharks due to gambling debts and was being pressured by creditors. He urgently needed 250,000 yen to handle the situation. Upon hearing this, Liu Min felt like she had woken up from a dream. She never thought that her seemingly caring husband was actually an irresponsible gambler. Filled with disappointment, Liu Min immediately refused, explaining that the money was reserved for her father-in-law's medical treatment. Not long before, Yan's father had been diagnosed with terminal colorectal cancer. However, Yan, consumed by his addiction to gambling, threatened his wife with a fruit knife to force her to hand over the money. But Liu Min refused to yield. At this point, Yan lost control, enraged, and murdered his wife. When he saw his new wife lying motionless on the floor, he began to panic. After some consideration, in an attempt to cover up his crime, he set fire to the house. During his escape, in order to avoid being recognized, Yan even switched to a black Toyota. Perhaps feeling unable to bear the immense psychological pressure or unable to withstand the hardships of living on the run, Yan turned to his parents for help, hoping they would cover for him once more. Fortunately, when his father learned of his son's crime, he refused to shield him and took him to the police station to confess. People couldn't help but wonder, why did Yan go from someone with great potential to a cold-blooded murderer just 3 months after getting married? Through Yan's father's account, we gradually understood the entire situation. In fact, Yan had been addicted to gambling long before the marriage. When he started working at the auto repair shop as a pampered rich kid, he looked down on the job and thought it was low-paying and unworthy of his status. With this mindset, he befriended a bad group of people and got involved in online gambling. Initially, Yan Haoji did win some money, but everyone knew that this was just a common tactic used by gambling sites. His short-lived victory only deepened his delusion, and in the end, what awaited him was an endless abyss. After winning some money, Yan Haoji believed that, compared to a stable income, gambling could help him accumulate wealth faster. So, he secretly quit his job and completely immersed himself in gambling, unable to break free. However, the good times didn't last long, and within less than 6 months, Yan lost everything. When he ran out of money, he didn't dare to seek help from his family, and could only resort to high-interest loans. However, the interest rates were like a snowball, growing larger and larger. His debts quickly accumulated to 500,000 yen. One day, Yan's father received a call from the neighborhood committee, informing him that his son had not paid his social insurance for several months. Under pressure from his father, Yan admitted that he had quit his job a long time ago. To hide this fact, he had been leaving home every day at the same time, pretending to go to work. But in reality, he spent the entire day gambling. When Yan's parents learned about his situation, they were shocked and angry, but they continued to protect him. They only scolded him briefly, and then helped him pay off his debts. After settling his debts, Yan seemed to regain his senses for a short while, and returned to his old job. During this time, he met Liu Min. After the two fell in love, Yan's daily expenses increased, and it seemed like money was never enough. So he once again turned to gambling. This time, his debts grew even worse, reaching over 1 million yen. At his breaking point, Yan Haoji could no longer hide his secret. He went home and knelt in front of his father, first admitting his mistakes, and then writing a pledge to promise that he would never gamble again. By this time, Yan and Liu Min were at the stage of discussing their wedding. Yan's father gave him two choices: completely change, allow the family to pay off the debt, then work hard and get married. If he hesitated, they would explain the situation to Liu Min's parents and cancel the marriage. Under the pressure of the debt, Yan didn't hesitate and chose the first option. Yan's father also understood that these so-called choices were just a last glimmer of hope. However, unfortunately, after getting married, Yan didn't change at all. Instead, he was dragged deeper into gambling. He once again quit his job and spent all his time at the casino. Not long after, he racked up a huge debt. At this point, he had completely lost all dignity and even set his last hope on his wife's wedding gift money. When he was refused, this irredeemable gambler completely lost his mind and murdered his wife. Since the crime occurred, Liu Min's family has been living in endless pain, each moment feeling like an eternity filled with suffering. They have waited in agony for justice to be served. What makes it even more heartbreaking is that one day before Liu Min was murdered, her mother had helped her discover she was pregnant and had planned to go to the hospital the following day. After Yan turned himself in, the case was handed over to the Pudong District People's Procuratorate in Shanghai. During the trial, Yan's cold attitude shocked the prosecutors. He said, "I don't want to talk. I just want you to execute me quickly. I'm not afraid of death. I am already dead." From this, we can see that after committing such a horrible crime, Yan showed no remorse and instead displayed extreme coldness. His words reflected a disregard for life. In his eyes, everything that happened was just an uncontrollable accident, and death seemed like a release for him. After his arrest, the police conducted a psychological evaluation on him. The results showed that Yan's mental state was completely normal. In other words, his cold attitude, lack of remorse, and even his desire for death stemmed purely from his indifference and lack of understanding of the crime he had committed. On the morning of July 30th, 2021, this case was brought to trial at the Shanghai First Intermediate People's Court. According to the verdict, Yan finally got what he had wanted. Yan Haoji was convicted of murder and endangering public safety with brutal methods, a vile motive, and extremely serious consequences. Although he confessed, his confession was not enough to reduce his sentence. Therefore, the court decided to sentence him to death. Upon hearing the sentence, Liu Min's mother, in tears, said, "A life taken must be repaid with death. My daughter can finally rest in peace." With this, the case was closed. But we cannot help but reflect. When facing a desperate gambler like Yan, how can one protect themselves? Liu Min, young and gentle, discovered her husband's true nature. If she had been calmer and used money to temporarily stabilize him, perhaps whether through divorce or litigation, she could have put herself in a better position. Unfortunately, she underestimated the darkness in his heart, and in the end, still believed that her husband would never commit such a brutal act. Additionally, the pampering and protection from Yan's parents, as well as their decision to hide his gambling problem from Liu Min's family before marriage, were also key factors that led Yan to the path of crime. Indeed, Yan's actions, apart from issues with family upbringing, are also his own responsibility. It's evident that Yan Haoji's life has been full of failures, but each failure was never one he had to face the consequences of, except for the last one. And that is the conclusion of this story. What do you think about the two interesting cases today? Feel free to leave a comment below. Thank you for your support, and see you again next time.